Yeah, yeah.
You said hell monkey? Oh, that's why I
Turned the lights off. Have to write everybody's name down. Well, welcome everybody. We're running just a couple minutes late here, but it is time to begin our policy session. This is our last council meeting of the year for us, so I figured it was appropriate to come a little more festive tonight. So I did turn the lights off, so I didn't want anybody to get distracted by the lights. So we'll begin tonight with our opening ceremony and turn the time over to council members.
Pledge of allegiance and then invocation. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. This evening as we meet together as city representatives and as a community to go over the business of the city. We are grateful for the freedoms that allow us the opportunity to do the will of the public and to have the opportunity we have to make laws and to govern ourselves. We are grateful for the residents that live in the city and for the differences in those that make our city a richer and more welcoming place to be. We ask this evening that we might do our deliberations with wisdom, that we might be able to act in the best interests of our city and according to the laws and ordinances that have been established. We pray for those who are away from our community and those who serve here to protect and keep us safe, and ask for a blessing to be upon those in our first responder community and those at the Air Force Base that is here in our neighborhood and those who are away serving our country. We pray for their safety and for their families. We also ask for a blessing to be on those in our community who are grieving at this time, and especially recognize the Hamblin family as they mourn the passing of our previous mayor and those who have served in our community. And this we ask in the name of His Son, Jesus Christ. Amen.
Amen. Council, we have minutes to approve from the November 20th community networking meeting and the November 27th policy session. You had a chance to review the minutes. Are there any additions or corrections? Seeing none, I'll entertain a motion.
All right, I move to approve November 26, 2018 community networking meeting, November 27th, 2018 policy session minutes as written.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, minutes stand. We have a myriad of public hearings this evening. So we will begin with our first public hearing is to receive public comment on a general plan amendment to change the land use classification on the city's future land use map from residential to commercial for property located at 755 East 200 South. And we'll turn time over to Spence.
Thank you, Mayor. Members of the council and the public. Oh, of course. Okay. Let's try that. Oh. I'm going to go sit down. The request this evening is at, as stated, Mayor, 755 East 200 South. The property is currently 1.35 acres, and the use on the property currently is a storage facility, Mesa Storage. The request from the applicant is to change the designation on the property from residential to commercial in order to facilitate a rezone of property That will be a subsequent application and presentation following this request. So again, the property is located here adjacent to I-15, the 200 South, right there before you go under the overpass. And so the request this evening is for a change to our general plan future land use map from residential to commercial in order to facilitate a rezone of property from residential to commercial as well.
Okay. Go ahead and declare the public hearing open. Is there anyone here to speak in regards to this public hearing?
Your Honor, seeing no request to comment, I would move to close the public hearing.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay. That moves us on to item number 2. So Spencer, we're going to take that back to you as to receive public comment on a rezone request now for that same property.
Thank you, Mayor. So again, just on the heels of the previous request for a general plan amendment, again, the property 200 South, the request is to rezone the property from residential R18 single family to commercial. The existing use on the property is commercial storage, which up until about 2002 was included in the Clearfield City zoning ordinance as an allowable use in the C2 zone. Therefore, the rezone of the property would actually make it more consistent with the use on the property relative to this request. So the Planning Commission, and I failed to mention this on the last one, Planning Commission recommended approval to the council for the general plan amendment as well as the rezone on the subject property. So.
Okay, we'll go ahead and declare the public hearing open. I should mention that there are forms outside on the podium if you're here to speak at any of our public hearings or as well as our open comment period. You fill those out and get those up to Win. I don't have any comments on this one. Is there anyone here to speak in regards to this public hearing? No. If not, I'd entertain a motion to close the public hearing.
I'll make a motion to close the public hearing, seeing no one who wants to comment.
Second.
I have a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay. That moves us to item number 3, which is a public hearing to receive public comment on the street vacation in the vicinity of 700 South and 1000 East. And Brad, I believe this is you.
Thank you, Mayor. For the record, Brad McElrath, Senior Planner with Clearfield City. As you stated, this is a request to vacate a portion of a right-of-way that used to be used as a street access for residential properties that are in this area, or that were in this area. A line, a sewer line, and also a gas line. And then the request is contingent upon allowing a utility easement to be located in that area instead of the right-of-way. The utility easement would be 20 feet wide instead of the wider width of the right-of-way, and it'd still allow for access to those utilities. So this is the location of that right-of-way. So you can see this is just north of 700 South. There used to be these homes that were there. Those have since been demolished. And so there's no necessary need to have that right-of-way there anymore, but there still is a need to have access to the public utilities that are located there. So this is the subdivision plat that has actually been amended since you had seen this on the work session. There's been some changes that the applicant has made to clean it up and to make it more clear. So I'll kind of zoom in there a little bit. So the right-of-way is the whole larger shaded area. So from this line here all the way down to the property line to the south. So they're requesting that that area be vacated by the city, and then they would like to replace that with a 20-foot utility easement. That 20-foot utility easement has been verified by myself and also by Public Works staff to still provide sufficient access for the utilities in this area. So with that, staff recommends that the City Council approve the vacation for this right-of-way, subject to the provision that they do provide that utility easement. We still have access to maintain our utilities in that area. So with that, I'm happy to answer any questions about this.
Any questions, council? Okay, declare the public hearing open. Is there any nation? You're making this really easy, just saying.
Your Honor, seeing no public comment, I move to close the public hearing.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay. Item number 4 is a public hearing to receive public comment on the rezone request for the property located at 1295 West, 300 North, from A1 agricultural to R2 multifamily residential. Brad, we'll turn that back over to you again.
Thank you. So this property is one of 5 properties that are located on the south side of 300 North that are currently zoned agricultural or A1. The general plan designation for this area is for residential, so most of the surrounding uses are single family, but there is some multifamily that's kind of mixed in there a little bit as well, with higher densities to the north, and then you've got some duplexes in the area as well. So this is the general plan and zoning designation. So on the left, you'll see what the current zoning is of the property. So you've got the property that's highlighted in red here is the subject property. As I said, it's one of these 5 A1 properties. It's the only one that's being requested to be rezoned at this time. So those other ones are not subject to this rezone request. On the east side, the south, and then also on the west side of these 5 properties, you can see that it's all single-family zoning. On the north side, you've got R19, which is a single-family zoning designation, and then RM, which is the mobile home park. And then you've got some commercial businesses that are there as well. And then on the right, you can see there's the future land use designation section on what types of land uses we should have in the area. So you've got commercial to the north and then residential all surrounding that. Based upon staff's research of the general plan and also the direction from the city to focus our density or multifamily development in our downtown corridor and having single-family detached housing outside of that, staff is recommending denial of the rezone request subject to the following 4 conditions. So these are subject to the, based upon these findings. Really, the main finding is finding number 4, is that Clearfield City is focused on multifamily development within the downtown area. The general plan specifically calls out the R18 zone as the default zone to be using in this area. I know that there is discussion. Possibly it has been used more so in the past, but the general plan currently doesn't allow that as a zoning designation. It says that it's the policy of the city not to allow R16. So on December 5th, the Planning Commission reviewed that. They deliberated over this request, but chose to forward a recommendation of denial to the City Council for this rezone. So with that, I'm happy to answer any questions.
Okay, thank you, Brad. We'll go ahead and declare the public hearing open. Is there anyone here to speak in regards to this this change? You'd come up and state your name and whether or not you're a resident of Clearfield.
My name's Jeff Smith, and I own property on 275 North there, so my backyard faces the proposed change. I purchased my home there in 1990, and at least part of the reason that made that home attractive was the fact that all these years I've had either horses or sheep as my neighbors in the backyard, and it's been good. I think that if changing the zoning would increase congestion in the area and probably decrease the value of my home there. So I'm opposed.
Okay, thank you very much. And yes, sir.
In the planning meeting,
Can you state your name?
Dean Cotter. I am speaking obviously in favor of the rezone. However, our goal was never to be multifamily. It was to be patio homes with not high density. And in talking to the buyers of the property, or the potential, they're willing to commit contractually to limit the number of homes on the property, and that if they don't perform, the property could revert back to the A1 standing. I think that's, hopefully that's a reasonable compromise for the council. Our goal was never to hurt the neighborhood. Our goal was to help the neighborhood. If you look at the concern that Mr. Smith had, which was the value of homes, you'll note that the patio homes just down the street, about 120 yards, are selling for about $300,000, where the average mid-century Rambler is selling about $275,000. So effectively, it could raise the value. Your concern was transportation, and transportation is about I calculate it's 3 football fields from the property to the bus stop on the corner of 1000 West and 300 North. Correct. With that, do you have any questions for me?
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Appreciate it. Any further comments? Okay. Seeing no further comments, I'd entertain a motion to close the public hearing.
Your Honor, I'd move to go ahead and close the public hearing.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, that'll move us to the next page. That is item number 5, which is our public hearing to receive public comment on an amendment to the final subdivision plat, Lot 2 for Dollar Tree subdivision located at approximately 585 North Main Street. It's my understanding that we've been asked to table this one. Is that?
Yeah, so the applicant actually requested that it be tabled from the December Planning Commission meeting to the January Planning Commission meeting. Therefore, the earliest that you'd be able to hear it would be the January 2nd, 2019 meeting. The Planning Commission did vote to table that item until their January 9th Planning Commission meeting. Just wanted to make sure that we are open with the public to, with your body to make sure that if you choose to table, that it does get tabled to that specific date and time.
Okay. Thank you, council. Knowing that, I would entertain.
Do we want to continue this public hearing until the January
We're just gonna
22nd
table
meeting?
the
You
letter.
can table it and take it back up on the 22nd.
Yeah.
Okay, I'll table it then. Till the January 22nd meeting that it says on
At 7
the
PM.
agenda.
Or if whatever time you want, but preferably 7 PM.
Okay, so we have a motion to table this item until the public hearing until January 22nd at 7 PM.
Second.
And a second. Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay. Item number 6 is a public hearing to receive public comment on an amendment to the final subdivision plat for West Square subdivision located at approximately 875 South Depot Street. Brad, one more time, this is you. Actually, 2 more times. You get the next one, too.
Yeah, thank you. Here, this is for this subject property. This doesn't represent the most up-to-date property boundaries, but there is currently a condominium plat for the first building, so Building A. The applicants are coming back, and they would like to condominiumize Buildings B and C. So this is really just a continuation of what they've already started. So this project was originally approved for apartments. They decided in the construction of the project, or in just looking at the market area, that they wanted to change these to condominium units and offer them for sale. So with the condominium plat for Building A, that included the Building A and the clubhouse, and then they also presented the CCNR, so the covenants, conditions, and restrictions for the homeowners association that would be applicable, and that is open enough that it does also include Buildings B and C, so that at the time. So this is the site plan, so you can see Building A there, and then Buildings B and C are these last 2 buildings, so this is just a closer look at those. The areas in between would consist of parking lot, and then this is the floor plan for Building B, so you can see that the top left, this is the floor plan for the first floor. These are all 3 stories. There's the opportunity for for residents to actually have a private garage if they'd like. Most of the parking would be surface parking, I believe covered parking, like with carports, but then if they would like to, they can also purchase a private garage. And then you've got the second floor and the 3rd floor. The overall project, I believe, is 141 condominium units. And then this is just the floor plan. Building C also has the private garages on the main floor, mostly residential. And then these are the cross sections for the building. So you can see that the area that's just in the single hatch, that is the building that's the private unit area, and then the patios or the porch areas, those would be the limited common area, and then everything else would be common on this. So the Planning Commission reviewed this item back on their November 7th meeting and forwarded a recommendation of approval to the City Council for this condominium plat, subject to the following 4 conditions. And I'd like to add that these conditions have been essentially met at this point. So.
Okay, council, any questions for Brad? If not, we'll go ahead and declare the public hearing open. In regards to this amendment. Okay. Council, seeing no public comment, I would entertain a motion to close the public hearing.
I'll make that motion.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay. Item number 7 is our public hearing to receive public comment on an amendment to the Larson Commercial Subdivision, Lot 2, Second Amendment Subdivision Plat located approximately 325 West Antelope Drive. Brad, we will bring you up one more time.
Thank you. So this request is for this subject property you see before you. So this is currently just one of 2 properties that are in the commercial, the Larson Commercial Subdivision. So it includes this property here and then the property to the southeast. So this is the second amendment. There was previously an amendment approved before. Include the creation of one new lot to the east, and then some of the things that come into play when we're amending a lot or when you're creating a new property is that we want to make sure that it meets the lot width, setback standards, access, landscaping, parking, etc. So it complies with the standards of the zone that it's located in. So here's the existing subdivision, or the Lot 2 First Amendment. And then here is the Second Amendment. So I'll just go back to the First Amendment. So you've got Lot 2B that's right here. This is how it is currently constituted, and then Lot 2A. So Lot 2A includes this property includes the Pond Depot building that's located in this area, and then also the north portion of this building here, which includes the Hell Monkey Cycles business and then some other auto businesses that are located there as well. So the proposal would, 2C, which would be primarily just for the Pond Depot business, would include the detention there, and then Lot 2D. Lot 2D would be the new property that's being created. In reviewing the subdivision or the creation of that new property, it complies with the setback standards, the parking standards. The thing that it doesn't comply with is the landscaping standards for the C2 zone. So the C2 zone requires that a minimum of 10% of a development or of a property in that zone be developed as landscaping. So you can see here that there is landscaping that exists along the building. They have some park strip landscaping here to the east, and then there's some landscaping around their monument sign here, and then also some landscaping on the north side of the building that faces Antelope Drive. And then this is just the rear of the building. So you've got the storefront location of the building on the east, and then you've got the warehouse space or the bay door access on the rear to the west. What's difficult about this property is even if you were to add more landscaping in certain areas, it's very difficult to get to that 10%. Run over this with the Planning Commission, and I've gone over this as well with the applicant. So there's parking spaces that are provided all along Antelope here. There's 3 parking spaces, and those are required for the Hell Monkey Cycles business. And so if we were to remove those parking spaces and provide landscaping, even the provision of landscaping along this area would still be short of that 10% requirement. So in reviewing with the Planning Commission, they forwarded a recommendation of approval to the City Council subject to these 6 conditions. Calls out that the applicant shall execute a development agreement with the City Council to allow the site landscaping to be under the required 10% as required by the C2 zone, and to preserve and maintain the existing site landscaping. So what the Planning Commission in their discussion decided is that they felt that the existing landscaping should be maintained, that it's a difficult site to try to add anything new, and it wasn't initially designed for that much landscaping, and it's kind of a building that is that was developed under previous zoning standards, and so now it's by creating a new lot, it now falls under these standards to provide this new landscaping. So they felt that it was appropriate to recommend approval subject to making sure that the landscaping be preserved as it is. It doesn't get reduced. The landscaping ordinance allows for modifications to landscaping, but one of those standards to allow for a modification is that a development agreement be executed. So that's why you see that as condition number 6, that we have a development agreement. So they felt it was appropriate to do that. Other than that, condition number 3 addresses the stormwater detention basin located in the southwest corner of Lot 2C, so where the Pond Depot business is. Right now, it is providing detention for the business up front. If lot 2D is 2D is created, so where the Hell Monkey Cycles business is, if that lot is created, we would want to make sure that on the plat there is language that calls out that that detention basin is allowed to continue to be used for that property. If the water's still going to drain that direction, property line there, we want to make sure that that's called out on the plat so it's maintained in the future. And then the other conditions listed here are just standard conditions from our city engineer. And then condition number 7 just calls out that because there's that monument sign on the corner up here, that right now it's on the same property as the Pond Depot business, but if the lot is created, it would be on a separate property, so therefore to not be an off-premise sign, any type of signage for the Pond Depot property would have to only be on that property. It couldn't be on that monument sign. So with that, I'm happy to answer any questions that you might have for me as a council.
So if it's not 10%, do you have a feel for what the percentage would be?
So for the percentage, I believe the most I could, when I was trying to figure out a number or I could get it up to, was probably about 6 or 7%, if I remember correctly.
And the agreement would still include taking those spots out and adding the landscaping, or just to have it there on the corner where it's at?
Yeah, so the Planning Commission's recommendation was just to leave it as it is, but to continue to have it be maintained. And so their recommendation was that a development agreement essentially call that out. You know, that the landscaping at the corner be maintained, and then the landscaping around the building be maintained as it is.
Any other questions for Brad? Okay, and we'll go ahead and declare the public hearing open. Is there anyone here to speak in regards to this amendment?
Your Honor, seeing no public comment, I move to close the public hearing.
My name is Cameron Dibb. I'm attorney for those that are involved in this property and this change, and they understand the situation, but they feel that this is the best way for the business that they're doing and what they're doing together as a business is they're splitting some items. They plan to continue with the detention basin to be continued to be used the way it is. They plan to do what they need to do to leave that as much as they can as open space. That 6 or 7% is a space, but they're planning to leave completely alone. They just think this is the only way they can do that without tearing up asphalt and everything else like that. And we ask that this be allowed and move forward. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other comments? Okay.
Your Honor, seeing no other public comment, I move to close the public hearing.
And second, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right. That brings us on to item number 8, which is our presentation of the comprehensive annual financial report for the year ending June 30th, 2018. So we're going to turn the time over to Heather Christofferson to come up and make that presentation.
Good evening. As you said, my name is Heather Christofferson. I am with Ulrich & Associates. We are the independent auditors for the city, and I am here to present the June 30, 2018 audit report. Again, this is 5 months ago, but it does take that long to complete the audit. So I'm going to do this briefly. There's 153 pages. So if you have questions, feel free to ask. If I don't know the answer offhand, I'll get with Rich and find the answer for you. I'd like to point out the most important part of the report and the most expensive. It starts on page 15. It is our letter stating that we are giving an unqualified opinion, meaning it's a clean opinion. We don't have any findings with this report other than one state compliance finding, which I'll go over a little later. Next, I wanted to point out pages 18 through 30. This is the management discussion and analysis. This is Rich's summary of what happened during the year. So if you really want to get the condensed version of what happened during the year, read these few pages and you can get a picture as to the status of the city. Questions so far? Okay, page 32 and 33. This is the statement of net position. This is the entire city reported as if it was a business on full accrual. This is not how you manage the city, but it does include such things as capital assets, net pension liabilities, and other long-term liabilities. Any questions on that?
Yes, Heather, I just
Yeah.
had one on there.
Mhm.
On the call it on the net position being up about 9 million and some change-ish,
Mhm.
and cash equivalents being down almost 2 million. Could you just briefly just give a summary of that 9 million and how that's reflected throughout the organization?
Just mentioned that as well. Best I can see, it looks like the biggest portion of that is the issuance of new debt during the year. So with that new debt, you required land and you have cash left over. So there's about $7 million of that $9 million.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Any other questions? Okay. The next statement on there is on page 34. What I wanted to point out here is this is basically the income statement. And what we're measuring here is each governmental function. You can see on the far left that we've got governmental activities such as general government, public safety. So we're showing the expenses related to that service to the citizens. And then as you're going to the right, you can see charges for services, operating grants. So this is measuring what you're charging for that specific service. And then as you go across, you can see a negative, for instance, on the general government of 3.8. That's the amount that function falls short of covering its own expenses. So what the city has to do is support that service through general revenues, which is the bottom half of that schedule, through property taxes, sales tax, et cetera. So as you go down that middle column of governmental activities, you can see that 10.3 million is supported through other general revenues, not supported by charges for services or operating. Any questions on that schedule? Okay, moving right along. All right, page 36 and 37. This should look roughly familiar. This is the balance sheets for the governmental funds on modified accrual. So this does not include capital assets, long-term debt, or net pension liabilities. What you're normally concerned with is on actually page 37, and this is the fund balances section. So we've got that split out into different categories of fund balance. We've got non-spendable, restricted, committed, assigned, and unassigned. When we look at state compliance findings, the state wants us to look at the combination of the committed, assigned, and unassigned year revenues. They want it at a level of 25% of general revenues, of governmental revenues. And right now, the city is actually at 41%. That's about 2.7 million over the maximum defined by the state. So that is included as a finding on page 152. As findings go, it's a pretty good finding to have. It means you're managing the funds and you've got some money left over to update infrastructure, et cetera. So just wanted to point that out. We've also got a schedule that kind of shows the history of that on page 127, if you're interested. It's at the bottom of that page. Okay. Page 41, 40 and 41. This is the statement of revenues, expenses, and changes in fund balance. Again, this is modified accrual accounting. So I wanted to point out on page 41, third line from the bottom, is the net change in fund balance. So this is the net income essentially for each fund. So as you go across, you can see general fund is up 2.9 million. And then the CDRA is down 526, just as an example. Overall, all the general government is up 1.3 million. The next set is page 50 and 51. This is the balance sheet for the business type activities. So it functions much the same way on page 51. Second line from the bottom is the unrestricted portion of net position. That's the amount available for future expenditures. And you can see across there a total of 10.3 million that's available across all utility funds for infrastructure, usually is what that's used for. Any questions so far? Okay. And then page 52 and 53, this is the income statement for the business type activities. Operating income, typically you want that to about net to zero, because that means your charges for services are covering your expenditures. If you did not take into account depreciation, which is the third line up, most funds would be in the green. They would be functioning, but depreciation does capture the use of infrastructure assets, and much in Clearfield City is older. So we're trying to account for that use in that depreciation line item. And then finally, I wanted to point out pages 122 through 144 is a 10-year history in various different ways of what the city has reported. It's pretty good to see where you've been and where you are. And I wanted to mention real fast before I forget, thank you to Rich and his staff. He was able to assist me in this audit to get it done in time for the end of the year.
Very good. Council, any questions? Comments?
Yeah, great work.
Heather, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Appreciate your work on that. And thanks, Rich, for all you do. Okay, that brings us to our open comment period. I don't have any forms from anyone that's here to just address the council, but we don't want to take that opportunity away. Was there anyone here that was here to specifically address the council during our open comment period? Okay, well, we'll move on to item number 10, which is to consider approval of and consent to the mayor's proposed appointment of an individual to the planning commission. So we have a vacancy on our, we've had one of our planning commissioners resign, so we've got two alternates that have been sitting in their position for a while now, and it's my recommendation, council, that we appoint Ruth Jones as a regular member of the planning commission with the term expiring of February 2021. And would present that to you for your approval.
Your Honor, I would move to approve and consent to your appointment of Ruth Jones as a regular member of the Planning Commission with a term expiring February 2021, and would authorize your signature to any necessary documents.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay. Item number 11 is to consider approval of ordinance 2018-31, amending the city's general plan by changing the land use designation from residential to commercial for property located at 755 East, 200 South. Brad brought up earlier for Mesa Storage. Oh, Spencer, excuse me. It wasn't Brad. It was almost all Brad. This was Spencer. I saw Brad stand up, and I thought he was going to come back up and do it again. Council, any concerns or comments in regards to this change?
This only makes sense to me because it's a commercial use.
Exactly. Okay, then I would entertain a motion on this change.
Your Honor, I move to approve ordinance 2018-30, amending the city's general plan future land use map by changing the land use classification from residential to commercial for property located at 755 East, 200 South, and authorize your signature to any necessary document.
Motion from Councilmember Phipps and second from Councilmember Thompson. Any further discussion? Okay, Councilmember Phipps?
Aye.
Councilmember Thompson?
Aye.
Councilmember Roper?
Aye.
Councilmember Peterson?
Aye.
And Councilmember Bush?
Aye.
Okay, that is unanimous. Item number 12 is to consider approval of ordinance 2018-28, rezoning property located at 755 East, 200 South from R18 residential to C2 commercial. Same piece of property, just now the rezone of that property. Any further discussion? I'd entertain a motion then.
Your Honor, I move to approve ordinance 2018-28, rezoning property located at 755 East, 200 South from R18 single-family residential to C2 commercial, and authorize your signature to any necessary.
Second.
We have a motion from Councilmember Bush and a second from Councilmember Peterson. Councilmember Bush?
Aye.
Councilmember Peterson?
Aye.
Councilmember Roper?
Aye.
Councilmember Thompson?
Aye.
Councilmember Phipps?
Aye.
Okay, and that is unanimous. Item number 13 is to consider approval of ordinance 2018-29, vacating a street in the vicinity of 700 South, 1000 East. This is the, again, the property we discussed here just a little bit ago. Any concerns or questions, council? This is pretty straightforward. Entertain a motion.
Your Honor, I'll move to approve ordinance 2018-29, vacating a street in the vicinity of 700 South, 1000 East, and authorize your signature to any necessary documents.
Second.
We have a motion from Councilmember Roper and a second from Councilmember Thompson. Any from Member Roper?
Aye.
Councilmember Thompson?
Aye.
Councilmember Bush?
Aye.
Councilmember Phipps?
Aye.
Councilmember Peterson?
Aye.
That is unanimous. Oh, yeah. Almost turned the page. Item number 14 is to consider approval of ordinance 2018-30, rezoning property located at 1295 West, 300 North, from A1 agriculture to R2 multifamily residential. This is the farmland right now and the property that's on it. Council, questions or concerns? Came to us with a recommendation of denial from the Planning Commission. Thoughts? If not, I'd entertain a motion.
With what we discussed in workshop, I would make a motion to.
I would second that. Now, my question though, real quick, as I throw that second out though. To Nancy or Stuart, would this need to be date specific?
Yes.
Yes.
What date would you recommend?
Yeah, we would need
any
to
unreasonable
do this for the
discussion?
22nd, January 22nd.
Okay.
And I probably ought to,
Some on-record discussion.
yeah, some on-record discussion somewhere, since we were in a work session beforehand, so that at least we have a reason as to why we are tabling this.
I'll chime
Go
in.
ahead.
One of the concerns I had that has been reflected in both the staff report and in the recommendation that's come up from our Planning Commission is that in the current request, there are some inherent conflicts with our general plan. Specifically, I believe it was number 4 in Brad's report. Our general plan right now identifies two, and I recognize that, I believe his name was Mr., the gentleman that spoke during our public hearing, Woodard, one of the interested parties in this parcel, noted, even though their intent was not to go high density like you would think of in a large apartment complex, the request for R2 is a higher density zone request, which would allow duplexes or something higher. This city's general plan recognizes that our density would be established along our downtown corridors, and that out in our neighborhoods where this falls, we are encouraging single-family development. Along with that, the R18 zone is the residential zone, which is a larger zone, is called out as the preferred and the policy that the city would pursue for future development of residential properties. In the request as it has come forward, my feeling, and correct me, council, in the discussion we had just prior to this meeting, there was a concern that to approve this with that particular request would run in contrary to our general plan. And as land use policy, that's just not a great road to go down. But there was some discussion about, could there be a way to work with the applicant to help them use their property, but to do so, we would need to have a different proposal come forward, and the ability to work with them to try and find a way that they're able to use this land and to help with the development, but one that is in keeping with the land use policy that is already established within the city that we try very hard to adhere to.
been at our workshop meeting, then he would have known what we discussed. Along with that, we are talking about amending our general plan to allow the R16 zone, which is a little smaller lots than the R18, which would allow this property to be developed single family, but not with as big a lots as surrounding it, but still not multifamily. And I think we've come up with an idea that we can use here, but we have to work with the property owner, and we can't do it now because it takes some other ordinance amendments. So that's why I was motioning to table this till January 22nd. Is that when we're
At 7 p.m.
at around there?
Okay. So we have a motion and we have a second from Councilmember Peterson. Any further discussion, council? Okay, I don't need a roll call to table this, do I? Okay. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay. Item number 15 is to consider approval of amendments to the West Square subdivision plat located at approximately 875 South Depot. Brad reviewed this with us for the buildings B and C. Questions, council, in regards to this? If you haven't had a chance to go visit this, hopefully you have by now, but great project. Very, very nicely done.
Yes.
I'm impressed with it. So if there's no further comment or questions, I'd entertain a motion.
Your Honor, I move to approve the amendments to the West Square subdivision plat located at approximately 875 South Depot Street with the conditions recommended by the Planning Commission, and authorize your signature to any necessary documents.
Second.
We have a motion from Councilmember Bush and a second from Councilmember Peterson. Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, that is unanimous. Next item is to consider approval of amendments to the Larson Commercial Subdivision plat located at approximately 325 West Antelope Drive. This is the odd parcel. I don't know what else to call it. Multiple parcels, multiple buildings on this, on the two. Thoughts, council?
I just wanted to, was contacted by two of the building, or the business owners that are using, they're in the north part of, I can't remember the number of it, the building that would become, I believe, 2D. Is that correct, Brad? They're in that white strip commercial on the north end. Yeah, right in there. Richard Hellmonkey from Hellmonkey Cycles and Scott Sneddon from DIY Photography. And both of them were unable to be here this evening, but wish to express their concern over anything that would limit the parking and the access that their businesses have been required to provide as part of their approvals, whether that was a site plan or a conditional use permit, and that they were, very concerned and expressed their wanted to be on record challenges to parking already, and that any kind of a consideration of cutting into existing parking spots potentially on that north end of the property that immediately abuts Antelope Drive, that they would express extreme concern to, because it's already difficult for them to operate businesses and service their clientele with the current configuration, and that in doing so would violate the requirements that the city's imposed on them for them to operate their businesses. So they wanted to have that concern voiced and on record.
Excuse me, Mayor. I know that the applicant has expressed an interest to comment or at least add to this, so just so you're aware at this point.
Say he has?
He has, yeah.
Oh,
He just
okay.
didn't know that.
Hello, my name is Cameron Winquist. I'm one of the property owners. I can't see your name there.
Nika Peterson.
Nika Peterson mentioned. I also spoke with some of the tenants, the two that she spoke of. And in doing landscaping on Antelope Drive, it takes away 3 of the stalls, which is a big deal with the allotted parking we have now. The only other thing we could see doing to improve the property anyway in landscaping would be to maybe plant some trees in that park strip if you guys like that idea. There are some no parking signs in that park strip already that the city put in there about a year ago. So that might interfere with those, but that is an option that we can see that would work, yeah, right along there.
To me, the landscaping, since it's been there for a long time, just changed in a lot. It seems a little unfair to force landscaping changes in changing the lot configuration. So I'm certainly, if you're reducing it, then you could build a case for that. But I don't personally have an issue with retaining what is there, especially if it's going to impact the ability to do business there.
Yeah.
Nothing really has changed from a business perspective.
Correct, yeah, we're just going to be splitting it into 2 parcels is what we're doing.
Yeah, I don't think planting trees would, I mean, technically the park strip doesn't count as a landscaped area anyway because it's not on the property, but trees sometimes interfere with snow plows and the roots could undermine the sidewalk and curb and gutter, so I don't think planting trees in there is a good idea. I agree with Vern, this has been here a long time. There's going to be no change to the looks of this. Nobody will know that it's a different lot or not a different lot. All it's going to be is a line on the paper is the only thing that's going to change. So, you know, to require more landscaping here doesn't seem to me to be appropriate. So I'm okay with it the way it is.
And one other thing to take into consideration, if it doesn't get passed, then it also makes it so that we have to sell both of those buildings together if we were ever to sell them. We can't sell one individually.
The only concern I'm going to bring up here, and again, it goes back to just the way our land use works on there. One of the stated goals we have within the community is to continue to improve our properties every time we go through a redevelopment cycle, and to use those opportunities when either we have changes in subdivision lines or lot lines to make those improvements, and to do that consistently with each property owner as those requests come through. Unless there are some real benefits to the city where you can make a case that a development agreement would be the most appropriate course of action here. My concern on this property, when you look at it, is as has been mentioned, to require additional landscaping conflicts with the city required parking that the businesses that are already on site need to operate it. But to then waive a requirement completely, we walk back a stated goal of our city to upgrade this and to allow a split, even though I get your point. It's, you're not going to see it visible right there. We miss an opportunity to continue to improve the look along Antelope right there, and look at a parcel that for the next foreseeable amount of time isn't going to have any improvements on it. And we also then, for every applicant that continues to come forward, there's a chance to set precedent to say that we're not going to require these upgrades and to do this right there. And I am sympathetic to a business transaction, but respectfully as a city, though, it's not something that we're allowed to consider as far as whether or not that meets our ordinance.
Sure.
And so the difficulty I have with this in recognizing this is that the recommendation to approve here does not meet our C2 at all. The Planning Commission has, called out that a development agreement could potentially do that, but again, that benchmark, when I look at that is what is the benefit to our city that would be the grounds for us to deviate from the requirements of our C2 zone, and what would be the justification for our city to say that we will allow one city or one applicant to take a pass and then ask another one to incur those costs and to try and do that. And so that's a real concern I have looking at this. Right now, where these parcels are adjoined, that has been addressed. There's adequate landscaping, there's adequate drainage. This L-shaped parcel meets that intent, was handled appropriately, and fits that standard to divide it. Inherent conflict that we would have to make a lot of provisions for without any real noticeable benefit to our city. I mean, obviously as a business owner, of course, but not to our city, and would, again, deviate from these standards. So that's a very difficult sell to make, that meets the intent of our ordinance for a justification for a development agreement deviation from that requirement.
Okay. Yeah, I like this gentleman said over here earlier, I don't know how to address it. The property is what it is, and I don't know if I could stretch it or do something different, I would. I told Brad if I could tear up the asphalt and put landscaping in there and park, we'll do it. But I don't think the city would want us parking on the landscaping and dragging mud out. I don't.
If you add landscaping, it won't meet the parking requirement.
Yeah.
And some situations, not all of the requirements in an existing lot are going to be able to be met. There may be other properties in the future that will have the same situation, especially this type of use where it's not really retail, but it was more, you know, with kind of warehouse in the back when it was originally done. So, you know, there may be some other cases where the ordinance isn't going to be exactly met. And what do? You put in landscaping, now it doesn't meet parking, so you leave the parking, it doesn't meet landscaping. It's not going to, but like in order to sell the properties individually, it needs to be 2 separate lots.
If those are 2 separate lots and they go to sell them, they're still under the same requirements, right, of keeping the landscaping there. So it's never going to improve if...
And that's a concern. If they do go to sell those lots at any other time, you know, you're now imposing that change on a new property
And
owner.
there's several properties, the daycare right next to us to the south, the bee place across street to the east. There's a ton of buildings along that street that are gonna have the same issue that I have right now because they were built in 1990s and they abided by everything then, but now the new ordinances, land left on the property they allotted for back then.
And that's a fair point. You know, each building comes in under the standards that are there, and you go with it, and in that respect, this is consistent. But ordinances continue to change and evolve over time, and we've set a standard that each business that comes in, we're asking them to meet, you know, the new standards that govern at that time, and you know, and that's universal throughout anything that we're doing in the city. You know, what you came in is what governs at the time. But if you change, that is a requirement that we ask of everyone. Sure. That you are going to make that change and come up to that, unless, again, there's a demonstrable benefit to the city where that kind of a concession is mutually beneficial. And I can see an obvious benefit. And if you could help with that, I cannot see where we've demonstrated, though, that the city benefits from making a concession in that respect.
I guess one point would be if they take away 3 stalls on Antelope Drive and nobody can rent that spot, then the city has a vacant spot sitting on 300 West and Antelope Drive. It would be vacant. There would be 0 parking for that first unit.
No, it's a very fair point. In no way am I advocating that we make it more difficult for any of the tenants who are currently in the space or in the future to operate there, because that is absolutely critical to their business. As I look at this request, though, it came to us only a few years ago to create that L-shaped parcel, and the standards and the considerations and everything that we looked at were met only a few years ago. Shaped parcel. In trying to do it now, you're right, I don't know that there is a good way to do it, and so I'm looking at does this meet the intent of being able to do it at all, because I can't. You're right, it would hurt businesses, but we can't meet a standard here that we've imposed on anyone who's going to go through this process.
In the agreement, if they were to do an agreement, it states that the retention pond would be used for both properties. In that same agreement, could they use the landscaping for both properties to take care of it? Because that's what they did originally. That's how it got approved 2 years ago, is because the landscaping was at least 10% for both parcels.
Yeah, I remember that came in, and there was enough on that.
So, I wonder if that, in that agreement, in that retention pond agreement, it also can state something about the landscaping for being as, accounted for possible. It's just an idea.
through the development agreement process, you know, the city and the applicants have the flexibility to come to a mutually beneficial agreement, and if it's passed by the council, then that would be considered. I say I've expressed my opinion of the concerns that the proposed subdivision on this cannot meet our ordinance, period. And again, I'm not advocating that we in any way harm those businesses. I just don't see a way that this can be met.
Okay.
Because they're an inherent conflict. So that's my 2 cents on that.
Sure, okay.
Excuse me, Mayor, may I be able to ask a question? Cameron, I know that, you know, if you were to remove those, those parking spaces along Antelope Drive, is there any along Antelope Drive and maintain the 3 parking spaces?
You know, when you and I spoke on the phone, there was a way to do a one-way street there, make that a one-way pass, but in doing that, I think that eliminates those parking stalls. There wasn't enough room to do the landscape strip, the parking stalls, and a one-way road through there.
I guess my question is there any way to add, maybe increase the landscaping here a little bit until it gets to the parking spaces? I can't see the parking spaces here, so maybe this gets a little bit wider.
I see what you're saying.
And maybe from the access to, from here to where the parking spaces are, there's some landscaping added. So, and I'm just throwing that out there as, is that something that you would be able to do, and is that something that the council would feel is consistent with the ordinance, and one way or the other, just thinking of that as an option?
Well, it seemed like a substantial amount to get to 10%, but, you know, just because if it's at 6% now, then that's nearly double the amount. So.
Yeah, so it's only about 3% or just under 3% right now. And so, and this, when Cameron and I worked together on this, figuring out if we added landscaping here and then even included the park strip as the landscaping, which doesn't count at all because it's in the city right away, that still gets to about 7%. You know, so even if we provide full landscaping along Antelope Drive here and then include this to count towards it, that still only gets to about 7%.
On the parking, Brad, along the back side of that, or west side of that building, is that not factored into the parking? Or that space back there? I mean, they're parking cars back there, but is that?
Yeah,
Okay.
so as Spencer just said, yeah, it never has been there. I know that there's this spot where I believe it's somebody with the Hell Monkey Cycles business that parks there. Most of the cars that are parked back here, based upon my few visits out there, it seems to be that the cars that are there are changing based upon like when they're getting repaired. So it's their cars that they're pulling it out of the bay and parking it there temporarily for a time before it is picked up by the owner or something. But yeah, it's never, as Spencer said, it's parking back here has never been factored into that because it wasn't striped parking spaces.
And eliminating those parking spaces on Antelope, does that change their then requirement on parking? I mean, they meet the required parking just along 300 West, correct, for the building?
Yeah, so the parking here and the 3 spaces gets them to the minimum amount that's required for the square footages of the units that are there. So for us, if we were to add landscaping along Antelope Drive and remove those parking spaces, now we're 3 parking spaces short of our standard.
So by taking one out of compliance or throwing another one in?
Correct.
And Mr. Hellmonkey from Hell Monkey Cycles, express again real concern on that, just how challenging that is, and even from the time that these have been striped and moving on, it's been he's operating at a little bearing. I think it was, correct me if I'm wrong, Spencer, 1.5 or 2. 2 was the required given the intensity of the use there, which would have put it at 6, and he has functionally 5 and can float into some others, but he's already on the short end.
Yeah, so Councilmember Peterson, if I may real quickly. So the way that our ordinance is written is parking is not based on building type, it's based on use. Therefore, the tenants in this building, depending on the use on the property, is what dictates the parking ratio. When Hell Monkeys came into this location and replaced the previous auto mechanic that was on site, we required them to come to the appropriate level of parking relative to the impact of their use, which is where those 3 additional stalls came from. So as we look at the parking standards in Title 11, Chapter 14, if we have a really, that would be 3.5 stalls per 1,000 square feet. Now, Hell Monkey's approximately 2,750, somewhere in that neck of the woods. So when the Planning Commission made this decision, staff originally recommended 5 stalls at a minimum, and the Planning Commission said, no, I think it needs to be 6. And there they have 3 stalls along the west and 3 stalls along the north, along Antelope Drive. So the conversation really is, what is the use of this property? And as more intense uses come, it's only going to be further out of compliance because that parking standard is going to go up and up and up. And so it's a difficulty to address that. Now, if there is a way to address additional parking on the site, whether that's additional striping and designation of areas, that would be great. But again, the auto uses on the site only impact that even greater, because not only they're parking, but they're storing, and there's that transition there relative to that. So there's a lot of issues relative to to resolve some of these outstanding issues that would be created if a subdivision was approved.
Okay. Counselor, I would entertain a motion.
Your Honor, I would move to deny the amendment to the Larson Commercial Subdivision Plat Lot 2, located at approximately 325 West Antelope Drive, TIN 12-809-0001.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to deny. Any further discussion? Okay. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?
Nay.
Nay.
You split?
Mayor, would you call a voice vote on that for me, please?
Yep, we will. Councilmember Peterson?
I vote aye to deny.
Aye.
Councilmember Phipps?
Nay.
Councilmember Bush?
Nay.
And we lost a council member somewhere along the way, so that leaves it down to me, and I'm going to vote aye as well to deny. And so that fails. Excuse me, the motion passes to deny. So that moves us to, lost track, 17. Consider approval of final subdivision plat for 700 South Maverick subdivision located at approximately 700 South and 1000 East. Brad, back to you.
Thank you. This request is by Maverick to create a new 2-lot subdivision at the property that you had stated. So the location of south. This area is the location of a Dominion Energy regulator station, as previously discussed with the right-of-way vacation, also the location of east-west water and sewer lines and an east-west gas line, and then also the old right-of-way. So these are the subject properties, and then there also is that right-of-way that we had pointed out before. So that this subdivision would include the combination of those properties and re-subdividing that into 2 lots. So this main lot, so lot 1, would be the location, would be large enough to be the location of a future Maverick gas station and convenience store. And then lot 2 is providing a space for that regulator station, which is currently located approximately in this area here, to be relocated to that northeast corner of the property. This proposed of easements for the access by Dominion Energy, it provides some blank spaces to record the document numbers for those documents, for those easement documents to be recorded prior to the plat, and then have those notated on the plat. Excuse me, and then this plat also includes the vacation of the right-of-way, which was previously approved by the city tonight, and then the provision of a 20-foot utility easement. And then just below that 20-foot utility easement is an additional 10-foot utility easement if it's needed. And then along this southwest corner is a dedication of right-of-way. So this is providing dedication for widening of that intersection in order to accommodate the types of vehicles that would be traveling to this facility. So that Maverick is a location for regular pedestrian vehicles, but then also high-flow pumps that would provide services for diesel vehicles to service those that would typically be driving to the Freeport Center. So they see that that's an opportunity that they could provide a service to those type of vehicles that are driving to and from the Freeport Center. They think this is a good location for that. So with that, staff recommends approval, but also the Planning Commission on December 5th forwarded a recommendation of approval for the final subdivision plat. I want to point out that some of these conditions have already been met since the 5th and tonight's meeting. For example, the proposed plat has been simplified as number 1 is indicating, so you don't see the contour lines here, you don't see the old property lines, that those have been taken off, so we're just seeing what is proposed. We're not seeing the existing. Condition number 2 talks about sufficient right-of-way shall be dedicated along 1000 East for northbound travel as determined by the traffic study and the city staff, and then the final plat reflect that. So city staff has reviewed this, has reviewed the traffic study that Maverick has ordered to be completed. That traffic study includes additional widening, which this provides, so this dedication provides that. And then the widening would include the extension of the left-hand turn lane to go all the way up the length of their property to their north entrance. So if you are on 1000 East and you're wanting to turn left, so to head east on 700 South, that left-hand turn lane would now extend the length of their property, as required by as recommended by the traffic study. And then the other conditions, condition number 3 is any outstanding items get addressed before the Mylar, the document where all the signatures are provided, be printed. And then condition number 5 just talks about making sure that the property is developed with the C2 standards and also the design standards. I've been meeting with Maverick representatives, with Leslie specifically, to go over the application and the design of the site, and we're really getting close. You know, there's a lot of things that Maverick has been willing to do to meet our ordinance standards, so I commend them for that and moving forward on the site plan approval. Other than that, the conditions number 4 and 6 are pretty basic standard conditions that our engineer usually wants to see. So with that, I'm happy to answer any questions about this subdivision request.
Brad, just a quick question.
Yeah.
There was a call out from Norst about that second hydrant. Do you know if that's been resolved and that Mavericks agreed to that second placement?
Yeah, so I don't know if it's been resolved yet, but that's going to need to be resolved on the site plan review. So with the site plan review, they have submitted a utility plan. I haven't had a chance to look at that in full detail yet, but yeah, that we would definitely want to make sure that there's that second hydrant there.
Okay, thank you.
Council, any further questions for Brad?
Yeah, can you repeat that last line? You said if we were turning left, what would happen again? I didn't catch all of that.
No, that's fine, Commissioner Thompson. So, Councilman Thompson. I'll just go back to the aerial image. So right now, the left-hand turn lane on 1000 East here, I think it begins approximately in this location.
You can see it, right?
Yeah, I can't see it very well, but you guys can
right
see
there.
it well. Okay, so.
And right there.
Okay, the proposal, the dedication that's being provided with the plat will allow 1000 East to be expanded further, or at least widened a little bit.
Okay.
So that way that left-hand turn lane will then extend all the way up to their north property line, or where their north access is. As staff, as I sat down with our city engineer, our staff engineer, and then also with a traffic engineer, we went over the different peak times of traffic. So the AM peak is really where we're going to see, the most congestion at this intersection. And that time is usually between 6 a.m. to 8 a.m., when people are leaving.
Yeah, the crossing guards kind of get there a little later, so I just kind of worry about children traffic too, if like the high school traffic kind of.
Yeah, and definitely, that has been part of our discussions with Maverick as well, that as staff, we see that if a Maverick is built in this location, we're looking for would have, the convenience store would have the full range of convenience that they would provide. And so we would see that this would be an attractive location for high school students, to go up during lunch. And so we would want to make sure that if that street is widened, that we're not widening it to the point where it then becomes dangerous for pedestrians to cross as well. So that's been part of our conversations as well. And that left-hand turn lane in the morning, again, looking at the traffic models, that's when it's the busiest. The PM, not so much. When it comes to the traffic that will be generated by this type of a facility, 70% of the traffic is actually from, or of 70% of those that would visit this site is from traffic that's already along 700 South. So again, it's a a matter of convenience that people say new location that they would be coming to. So only about 30% or less would be new trips that are generated along 1000 East. And based upon the locations that they're proposing for their access points, I feel that they'd still be able to get in and out of the site.
Okay, any further questions, council? Not an entertain a motion.
I'm sorry, Mayor, Leslie, did you want to add anything?
I should ask
to
the applicant if she had anything to say. Sorry, Leslie.
Hi, thank you so much for reviewing this. I just want to thank staff for the excellent job. I really don't have anything to add to the presentation, but I would like to provide you with the opportunity to ask me any questions that you may have.
And can you state your name for the record?
Yes, I would love to. Leslie Mascaro, and that
Thank you.
is great.
My wife, would tell me I have to turn the lights on.
Oh my goodness, it even has lights. I just noticed the lights.
It's not specific to the subdivision plat, other than just timing for anticipated construction beginning and then to be open. From the residents in this area, they're asking, so what's going on? How soon is construction going to start? And how long do you anticipate the traffic impacts during that construction phase?
Excellent question. So we actually began construction, demolition last summer of all of the homes and cleaning up the site. We are anticipating to be completed with entitlements sometime in February. And then shortly after that, to finalize with Dominion Energy. We're also working closely with UDOT. Our hope is to remove some trees that are located within that right-of area, and then also kind of bring down that right-of-way area just to kind of clean up the entrance feature into the city. It will also be a lot more pleasing for our site as well. There is a no access line that's associated with that, and that is a little bit of a process. I believe that will be about roughly 6 months. Hopefully we'll be able to speed it up, but again, we're kind of working on someone else's timeline, and so our hope is to begin construction no later than this summer, and we're really hoping for a 2019 store if at all possible.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Okay, excellent.
Thanks for joining us. We appreciate it.
Thank you so much.
Okay, council, entertain a
To approve the final subdivision plat for the 700 South Maverick subdivision located at approximately 700 South, 1000 East. Tax ID numbers identified with the conditions recommended by the Planning Commission, and authorize your signature to any necessary documents.
Second.
We have a motion from Councilmember Roper and a second from Councilmember Peterson. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, that is unanimous. Item number 18 is to consider approval of a final subdivision plat for the Woodward subdivision located at 1350 East, 700 South. And Brad, we'll bring you up one more time. Well, one more time for this meeting.
Yes. Thank you. This is a final subdivision plat request to amend these existing properties so that the properties will look a lot the way that they do right now. They just don't currently. So to amend the property lines would require, by our ordinance, a subdivision plat. And so that's why that's before you tonight. The proposal is, or the request is to amend this shared property line here between the two lots or property. So you've got this front property there and then the property to the rear. So this proposed subdivision, this kind of gives you the overall view, and I'll zoom in so it's a little bit easier to see. So lot one would be the location up on the front where you have the convenience store for the gas station, and then the property line would be moved from approximately this location up to the proposed location. So that would be at the rear end of the convenience store. That would be the dividing wall between that and then also the auto repair business. As part of that, because it would be along a property line, that dividing wall would have to as required by building code, and the applicant is aware of that. And then future development of this site includes the demolition of the gas station here, the car wash, and then possibly some addition of one row of pumps. As you can see here, this back lot, so lot two, is essentially a flag lot by our standards. So it provides an access to the rear here, and then there's also across that there is a access easement in favor of lot one. So lot one, any traffic would also be able to cross that easement there. So, and then accessing this property is going to go across Lot 1 and also by way of this access easement. So with that, the Planning Commission did forward a recommendation of approval on the 5th to these following 5 conditions, and I'm happy to answer any questions about those that you might have.
Yeah. Go ahead, Ken.
So do these 2 lots meet the landscaping requirement?
There was my question.
Great question. So currently they do not. So I have brought that up to the applicant, Mr. Woodward, and if you have any questions, you could ask him about that. But I have made him aware that that would be a requirement of the site plan review, or any changes that happen on the site, that he's going to have to bring the landscape up to conformance. So this lot 2 will need to have the 10%, and then also lot 1 would need to have the 10%. He's indicated that he's put that into his scope of work and anticipates doing that. There is some area that along the frontage of this property, it's actually part of UDOT rights, recommended that that does get landscaped in that area there, between the sidewalk and where those pumps are, at least the minimum distance that's required by our ordinance, and then still allows for access. So there are opportunities, especially with the demolition of the car wash, and then along this west property line that's kind of shared, and also southwest property line, there's some areas that additional landscaping can be added. So I'll be working with him to make sure that that can happen, and that's I believe one of the conditions, or at least condition number 4 says that it has to comply with the development standards of the C2 zone, which would encompass that.
I think it should draw out the landscape. I guess if it says it has to require, fit the C2 zone, then it's covering it. So.
And a plat.
Correct, yeah. And in discussing it with Mr. Woodward, he felt comfortable that he would be able to meet that requirement.
Okay.
Brad, there was a call out in the packet, just with the concern that had come forward from the Davis and Weaver Canal Company.
Yes.
As far as making sure that they've got their access on their main line. Has that been resolved?
Yeah, so so right here, and I'll kind of go back to the aerial image. So here is where, the location of that canal along that line there. So with this subdivision, and even with addition of landscaping, there wouldn't be any impact to their site at all. So, their access would still be provided. They'd still be able to access their canal line, and there wouldn't be any problem with that.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, thanks for the question.
Any further questions, council? Okay, thanks, Brad.
Yep, thank you.
I'd entertain a motion.
Your Honor, I'd move to approve the final subdivision plat for the Woodward subdivision located at 1350 East, 700 South, with the conditions recommended by the Planning Commission, and would authorize your signature to any necessary documents.
Second.
We have a motion from Councilmember Peterson and a second from Councilmember Thompson. Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, that is unanimous. That brings us to the last agenda item on our our city council policy session. That's consider approval of addendum 1 to the memorandum of understanding MOU with the Lotus Company for the redevelopment of Mabee Place. We'll turn the time over to Summer Palmer, our assistant city manager.
Good evening, Mayor, Council. We reviewed this in work session last, just to go over it for the audience. And we also have both Joe Torman from Lotus Company and Adam Hughes from Better City here to answer any additional questions you might have. But as you remember, last year in April, we entered into an MOU with Lotus Company for the redevelopment of Mabee Place. And both the staff report and the original MOU were included in your packet. At that time, we agreed that we would continue to work together to negotiate the purchase of Lakeside Square, close and clear the mobile home park, prepare some conceptual drawings for the development of both the east and west side of the development, and the owners the purchase of their properties, as well as secure some letters of interest. And we have one from Sub-Zero and Marine Products at the time, or at this time. In order to move forward with our vision for may be placed, we need to now amend the MOU. And ultimately, our goal at this point would be to just take the next steps to confirm our partnership with Lotus and work towards a development agreement which will really cement in more contractual form the purchase price and the actual components that will be required in the development. So we're not there yet. We're just taking the next step. The MOU amendment will include continuing to go down the path of how we'll use the land for the mobile home park site and also the east side of the project. We have some preliminary site plan layouts which were included in the packet. It would also include a bridge, which we feel like is critical to the continuance of the project and the traffic, or the walking traffic back and forth across State Street. It would include multi-family housing on both the west side and the east side. And at this point, it would also, the fact that the majority of that would be a for rent product that would be professionally maintained and managed. Lakeside Square would have some live-work units, potentially a movie theater, a hotel, mixed use, restaurants, retail, recreation attractions. These are all things that we would continue to pursue with this partnership with Lotus. As we continue to work down the path, what the city would be committing to is that we would pursue, the city and the CDRA would pursue going down the path of creating a CRA with a blight study and potential eminent domain powers attached to that CRA, and that planning staff would plans would conform with the form-based code standards that we have in place for the main corridor here, and that both parties would continue to work down the path of that development agreement that I mentioned. So with that in mind, we would recommend that we move forward with the addendum to the MOU. We know that there's been some questions since our last discussion about the use of LIHTC products in this development. There's a lot of questions that I know some of you may have about that product, but the approval of this addendum doesn't require that we agree on the use of LIHTC products right now. The development agreement can include us using that in the project, but this addendum doesn't specifically call out using any kind of LIHTC product. And so we could continue to have that conversation with council and with our partners as we get closer to a development agreement. So with that said, I mentioned we have both Joe and Adam here, and I'd be happy to answer any questions for you as well.
Well, I think you're probably aware that I have a problem that I expressed in our work session about the concept of the rentals. And I went into that with an open mind, and having read the preliminary discussions about the arguments in support of rentals and listened to that carefully, was three basic points. One of them is that the high density is better managed as a rental community than with a owner-occupied, that the nature of high rentals increases turnover, which produces a better business prospects for the business owners. And then the third, which wasn't really included but then was mentioned there, was potential for owner-occupied. It can actually compete with planned hotel facilities. So I've thought a lot about those, and I don't see through empirical evidence or through logic any of those holding value. So I have a significant problem with one of our premier, probably would be the premier location when it's fully developed, having rentals, especially potential for, as we said, lower income rentals being the major residential component of that. I don't think that that's appropriate, and I don't think the citizens of our community think that it's appropriate either. So I don't see a case for the city to agree to rentals there, based upon the arguments and discussion that was presented to me.
So my question would actually speak to one of Vern's earlier concerns, which would be parking. In exploring this MOU, and actually and I'll talk about some of this in the work form-based code, and I know this is very expensive, but considering that we're trying to go for a connective work and play community, parking garages, are we even thinking about exploring this any type of way? Because my worry is you got all this density, all this, and then we just don't have the applicable spots in that. And I would love to see some dealings where, like I've seen, well, that was kind of different though. But I would love to see some dealings where maybe even the development would make an agreement with maybe garage developers where they can have some, like if a renter wants that spot, you know, additional paying, I don't know whatnot, but I'm really interested in developing some garages along that corridor within these developments, just so we can ensure that the work and play connectivity that we're looking for is applicable, just in case, whatever the case may be. I don't know, that's just where I'm coming from.
Sure, so a development agreement would really lock in the number of parking stalls that would be required on both sides of the street in this project, but also those would be in compliance with the form-based code. So really you can look at the form-based code and see what those standards are now, and a development would have to agree to any variance to that standard that we have in place right now, if that makes sense. And also the scooters that we're talking about and the connectivity to the transit may be more applicable to the Clearfield Station project than even to maybe Place.
Correct.
So there's still going to be a number of residential parking spaces that are going to be required here, and then more for the participants or the customers, the consumers that are going to be taking advantage of the recreational activities and the other commercial enterprises that we have on the other side.
And I'll just chime in also that this concept plan that's included in this addendum 1 is exactly that. It's a concept plan. There's not much level of detail here, but there is, for example, it does show on the east side of the street where we have the highest density residential. That's what they call a wrap structure, where you have structured parking that is completely surrounded by the residential units. So you would drive into the parking structure, parking garage, and you drive up to the level that you're living on, right? You park on that level. So that's on the east side of the street where it's the densest. On the west side of the street, where we see a lot of the towns would have garages in them. There are apartment buildings on the west side that, at least right now, are conceived to be surface parked, and much of the retail and office area on the east side also conceived to be surface parked. That said, I remind you that it is conceptual, and we have had conversations several times with Lotus about do we need public parking, for example, for the pond and the developments there, where we need access to, structured parking for those amenities for the general public, not the people who live there, but just the general public coming. So all of that still is very much in the conversation, but it's way too early to nail it down. But as Summer just said, that would get determined with development agreement.
To Vern's point, I think he makes some good points as far as about some of the rentership. As far as some of those components, I've heard information on both sides, but I'm at a phase personally where I haven't weighed in on either one and would like to see, because as Vern brought up, there's a lot of resident concern about even entertaining that type of a housing component. And there would need to be a really good case as far as how that's going to fit in our city, but also how it would differentiate for how it's been rolled out in the past. And that's not something for me that I'm at that point of saying I think that's a good fit or I don't. but it's not enough to be a make or break at this point, just given the fact that this is a non-binding agreement with these, and it allows us to continue to pursue it. And what I'm looking forward in supporting this is that additional information will come forward that would allow us to make a more informed decision about, yes, I could make a case to residents that the rentership in particular would work, or where I've said, after examining it in a lot more detail than I've had at this point, I can't support that kind of a product, and then would look at what that would mean with our relationship with Lotus for that side of it.
Great. And I think there's two distinctions here. One, there seems to have been some concern about the LIHTC product itself, that we can continue to flesh out because it's not part of this addendum. And then a for rent product. Those are two separate things that I think we need to consider. And Joe's has offered even to take council on a field trip, and so that you can see some of the products that they've turned out. The mayor, JJ, and I have already been to a couple of those sites, and honestly, when we talk about this being, kind of the crown jewel area in the city, that's what we're looking for, and that's what we'll continue to push for from this developer. But at this point, having seen those products already, I can tell you that you're not going to be disappointed, and that it is what you'll be looking for, and that the way they manage those projects will impress you, and that's something that they'll continue to work with us on helping you better understand, and whether that's a field trip or whether that's continuing to have them come in and talk to council on a regular basis to build a lot of time between now and approving this addendum to the MOU and cementing those specifics in a development agreement, if that's fair.
I wanted to say, so I'm not opposed to renting at all. I think those people have just as much value in a community as someone who owns a home. And I would like to see us create that place where people can come and be a part of our community no matter how they want to live in their housing. But I think it does bring a clean component to that area and well managed, and I don't think we'll see that if we don't have some sort of component there. And we've opened up that space for high density, and with that comes rental.
Well, I think it creates a vibrant downtown. I haven't been to a vibrant downtown that's not so.
Well, yeah, I don't want to belabor the point because I think our minds are made up, but I can think of a vibrant downtown called Salt Lake City that doesn't have any rentals downtown, or Ogden, but in any case, I think there is a linkage between the LIHTC and rental, because certainly you couldn't have LIHTC without
Sure,
there being rentals.
absolutely. But you can have for rent products without LIHTC. And
Yeah.
I think that's the
Correct.
Yeah, so they are bound together.
Okay, any further discussion, council? If not, I would entertain a motion.
Your Honor, I move to approve Addendum 1 to the Memorandum of Understanding with Lotus Company for the redevelopment of Maybe Place, and would authorize your signature to any necessary documents.
Fighting over that one.
I didn't finish the work.
Okay, we have a motion from Councilmember Peterson and a second from Councilmember Thompson.
I don't say anything.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed?
Nay.
Okay, we have a split vote with 4-1. Councilmember Peterson, or Councilmember Phipps is our nay. That brings us to our communication items. Been a couple of really busy weeks, and it's, as we get into the holidays, only becomes even busier. Just a couple of notes. We have, we'll meet tomorrow as the Davis Loan Fund Committee for COG to look at a couple new businesses, and for the first time in a long while, both of those businesses are Clearfield businesses. So just cool to see that happen. Been working on for a while now with the Intergenerational Poverty Committee, the IGP committee for the county. We had a discussion this last week that I kind of brought into it, asking the why of this committee, and it turned out that the real, outside of the real need to address intergenerational poverty, the why seemed to be that in order to get the grants from the state, we had to have a committee. And so I've asked the county to start looking at combining resources and really kind of putting all resources somehow under one roof. We have so many different sources for assistance and housing and food, and they overlap on so many cases, and they're only, and I think there's a real opportunity to just kind of bring it all under one roof and at least into one database, so that if you're at the food bank in for Open Doors in Layton, that somehow that is documented into a state-centered database, so that when they go into that same food bank in Bountiful, that they're aware that they've already been receiving food in Clearfield or Layton, and that there be some organization from there. So we'll keep working on that. We had a great Spouses Club Expo. The spouses put on from Hill Air Force Base. They did their expo at the craft expo at the Clearfield Aquatic and Fitness Center. This is the first year that they've had it here. They had it once off base in the last 30 years. That was last year. They took it to the Davis Conference Center, and it was pretty much a flop. They couldn't make money. They had an overwhelming turnout this year, to where next year they only took up the one half of the gym. They'd reserved all of it. Next year they will likely take the rest of the gym. They've already had requests to come be a part of that. So very, very cool. Went through a couple of seminars this last week with the National League of Cities on creating a gig economy. That was a new terminology to me, as a gig economy. But it is teaching and helping us as a city to teach our residents to run on a gig work. So gig work could be anything from an Uber driver to somebody on Fiverr.com, or people that are doing things, mowing lawns is kind of gig work as well, if you really look at it. And how do we help Circles program? Are there opportunities with that group of people to, instead of having, or in addition to having another job, to be able to increase their income through that type of work, and how do we train them to be able to follow after that? And so I've actually applied for we'll see how that goes, for a free, they were looking for 3 cities to break this out into and actually give free training to, and to come in and start the program for us. So we'll see how that goes. Had a great, the funeral for Nellie Hamblin was very well done, and kudos to our police department for providing the escort. That meant that more than we'll ever know to the family, to have that escort. They just thought that was the coolest thing in the world. We'll be renaming, or naming, because it's naming the park on 200 South, formerly known as the 200 South Park, or the Swing Set Park, after Mayor Hamblin. So staff is in the works on that. With Nellie Hamblin's passing, we missed the passing of another very prominent Clearfield resident, and that was Mark Livingston. Mark had been around for a long time and has been active within the city for decades. Vocal, but very active, and been a good part of the community.
And he was on the Board of Adjustment for many years and was chairman for a lot of those years.
Yeah, and a good friend of mine, a good friend of the city, and his celebration of life was this last weekend as well. And then yesterday, just hats off to the community choir for a great community presentation last night. They did a really good job. We all missed the band concert tonight, but they'll learn not to schedule that on our council sessions if they want us to attend. I was going to go and just leave it all to our deputy mayor there, our mayor pro tem, will run this meeting. But anyhow, that is all I had. Councilmember Bush.
Yeah, I was going to mention the Hamblins and Livingston also. Just a reminder, this Thursday, 6 o'clock at the North Davis Sewer Board office, we'll be holding a public hearing to do some amendments to the 2018 budget and approve the 2019 budget, if anybody's interested in coming to that 6 o'clock Thursday.
Okay.
That's all I have.
Councilmember Peterson.
A couple things, chance to join with a lot of people from our community from different faiths and community groups to be at Children of Hope, and that is spearheaded by Pastor Ron Brown from New Hope Fellowship Church and the Hope Center. And each year they provide several hundred gifts to families in our community that they dub the working poor, and it is specifically designed to be an alternative to payday lending and other ways of providing a Christmas for a family that would put a family in worse financial situation. And so just commend them and that continued effort within our community that continues to grow every year. We look forward to that first of every December. Also had a chance to observe some of the job fairs and additional constructions at G-Force. Getting excited for the 150 jobs coming into us with that. He's not here this evening, but I just wanted to express my appreciation on air to Chief Crucy, who will be retiring in the next month. I don't know that we'll see him at a council meeting before his retirement. Is that correct? So just, if he's ever watching on YouTube or wants to go back and look at that, just express my appreciation to over 30 years of service to our community. I mean, that's remarkable to dedicate not only a life to service in law enforcement, but to do it all right here in Clearfield. And we appreciate his direct outreach to our community and the legacy that he'll leave behind, particularly in our outreach in this last year. It has been remarkable, and there have been so many comments that have come in on the availability of having our police there so much more in our community, and so we appreciate that very much. Also, thanks to the mayor for, you have been very busy. The list of activities that are on there on behalf of the city, just with a lot of the behind the scenes stuff. We just appreciate all that happens with. Comment. I just want to just take a quick moment. This was an interesting agenda, not only because we had 19 items, but because we had 2 items that came in as final subdivision plats that were very different. And I just want to just make a quick comment on that. One of them came in, and the proposal as it came in was legal. The other one, as it came in, was not legal, and so there was a discussion about whether or not there should be a discretionary call on the council to invoke a development agreement to allow that. It's difficult to make decisions, but I think as we try and move forward and hold standards as we continue to redevelop, that's something that's important to begin that process, especially along major corridors, as both of these properties were, to encourage that development and to hold a standard and to ask that continue to come forward, even though sometimes it's a difficult decision that our applicants were different. But as Clearfield rises, to hold that standard and to encourage that. So, thank you.
Amen. Councilmember Johnson.
Yeah, right. The only thing I really have is I had a great meeting with the Davis County Office of Economic Development and the Davis County Chamber of Commerce, just addressing the growth in our, not only in our, that's coming to our city, but through our county when it comes to minority engagement and minority businesses. It's going to look like some of that's going to come to cause. Sorry, Mayor.
Not during. But not while I'm the chair. So that'll be next year, and somebody else can take care of that.
So what we're finding is a lot of the questions that are being asked haven't been asked. Our county, as far as residents, especially in our city, I believe we have like and I have to look through my notes, but we have like about a 3% increase in our Hispanic population here in our city. And African Americans had a 1% increase, which doesn't seem like much, but it's actually a lot when it comes to people. Asians remaining the same, and we're actually having a decrease in the white population. I don't know why that would be, but looking at all these different types of growths, I really think that our city has a very good chance of getting ahead of the curve when it comes to things of inclusion and economic development. I would love to see a way, if I can try to create a meeting with all the different diverse chambers to come to our city to discuss some of these things, because in discussing with residents about our economic development section, when they go to our website, the only thing they get is the Davis Chamber of Commerce. Regardless of how I may feel, they don't feel like that place may understand where they're coming from or their struggles. And while I disagree, I still think that maybe if we can create some type of inclusionary front on economic development, that'll create more of the message that we're trying to portray as a city. I mean, a lot of people all the time when they see me, they talk about Mayor Shepherd and actually our council and the willingness and the work that we do and how we're ahead of other cities, even cities who may be minority dominant. So I'd just like to say thank you, Davis Chamber, and Sean Buse, who's over the Davis County Office of Economic Development, for helping me in this project.
Okay, thank you. Councilmember Roper.
Just wanted to thank those that have donated to this Clearfield Youth Commission and their Sub for Santa. Especially wanted to thank the donating some goods to donate, as well as the Clearfield Police Department, who donated a significant amount of money that will probably help us be able to give to 2 families instead of just the one, if we play our cards right. So thank you so very much for that. I also just wanted to thank everyone for a great year. I love being here. I love the fact that we can disagree at times and debate and come to sometimes good consensus among us, but that we can always walk away as friends and know that we are just doing what is in our hearts. So I just wanted to say Merry Christmas, and I hope everyone has a great New Year.
Thank you. Councilmember Phipps.
Yeah, I'd like to just take a minute, and Hamlin, I knew him personally. We lived in the same neighborhood for 3 decades and worked closely in church assignments, and so I got to know him very well on a very personal basis. He is one who had a great love of Clearfield. His roots are deep in Clearfield. He was committed to it and really wanted to see its success. So I can tell you a lot about what his private thoughts were, but I don't think he would let me do that, want me to do that. But I also, interestingly, his grandson, Ryan, who many of you know, had the unique opportunity of digging his grave. And so that was really exciting for him. But that actually led about the care that those people have that maintain the cemetery and how much that means to them and how much respect they have for what is going on there and how they go out of their way to ensure that the services at the cemetery are respectful and such. And so it just touched me again of the commitment that the employees of the city have, especially those that interface with the public and in difficult times, whether it's financial difficulty or anything like that. So it's a real tribute to the city, and I learned a great deal about that Ryan would be embarrassed if I spoke about in public. But, I think I mentioned before, I will be out of town the 8th, and so I will also not be available, be at the meeting on the 8th of January. So.
Okay. Very good.
So if you want to talk about Lotus again, then.
That goes right to that whole Tim's comment of, we can still be friends. It's a couple of quick
Vern and I will always be friends.
Back to JJ. A couple of things I meant to mention. Falcons Are Fabulous started this week at Clearfield High. We're trying to support them, and each night they have picked a restaurant somewhere to, if you're shopping there, they'll donate. If you're going to mention you're there for Clearfield High, they will donate a portion to Falcons Are Fabulous. And since they are trying to raise money to put a food pantry inside of Clearfield High, we want to support them all we can. Also, for those who, Urban Air is now Urban Air Clearfield, no longer Urban Air Layton. I've spent way too much time having to negotiate this out, but they are, as officially this afternoon, Urban Air Clearfield. They have a massive grand opening planned. The 22nd is meant to be their grand opening. As long as all of our approvals and everything through the city come through okay, they're pretty much up and ready to go. So I'm confident they will be ready on the 22nd. That being said, they would like us to be there on the 21st in the morning, and we'll finalize things and get them out to you. But for breakfast that morning, I have council and part of our staff there to be the first people through there. Of course, Vern, now you're going to be out of town. We'll Facebook Live it for you. You can walk through with us, and we'll save you a donut.
My laptop.
We'll save you a donut. They'll be doing that. They have that evening will be from 5 to 8 is their plan, a first responders night. So they will want all of our police department and the fire district and their families to come for free. at 6 o'clock that night on the 21st, and then at 6 o'clock that night, from 6 to 8, they will have a charity that they want to support, and that they've chosen Open Doors to be their charity. So we will be inviting the members of the Circles program and some Open Doors staff and others to come out as well and enjoy a free night of urban air before they open the next day. That next day when they open, they are planning a celebration of Krispy Kreme kind of magnitude, or Chick-fil-A. She tells me that go through there, that purchase the day pass, the full day pass, will be given a pass. I can't remember what they call it, Irby pass. It's a 1 week or 1 day per week per year. So they'll have an hour every week for 52 weeks to go through for free. That they want to do for the first 200 people that go through there and buy the pass. So they're expecting lines, they're expecting radio, they've invited everybody, and their mother will come out, media will be coming out. They really want to make this a big deal, so hopefully we as a city will be, give them some, we've snobbed them for a couple of weeks now because we needed to. I was hell-bent on not giving a company in Clearfield that had its name be Layton support from us. I just have a real problem with that. If you can't be proud of the city that you're in, they have come to the table full heart now and are proud to be from Clearfield. The website has changed. The Facebook, Twitter, Insta, and everybody will change here in the next day or two. So they will be 100% Clearfield. So
What time on the 21st?
don't have a time for it. It'll probably be 9 o'clock in the morning. They asked, it's our choice, so we just want to pick a time for breakfast that works.
So you email us when it...
Yeah, we'll have Nancy get everything out to you by email. JJ, staff reports?
Yeah, first I wanted to mention, I never knew Nellie Hamblin, but it was a real privilege to be able to attend his funeral, learn more about him, and I appreciate his service to our community for over so many years. Tomorrow from 1 p.m. to 2:30, Senator Mike Lee in our building for what they call a mobile office visit. If anyone should want to come and make contact with the senator's staff. Also, we talked recently about meetings with our own state legislators and talking about our priorities legislatively for the upcoming session. We have a couple of those meetings scheduled. One is breakfast on Monday morning, the 17th, with Senator Milner, and another, I believe, is lunch on January 2nd with Brad Wilson and Carrie Ann Lisenby, if I remember everything correctly. And Handy. Okay, excellent. So anyway, if I believe Mayor Summer and I will be attending. If there are others that are available and want to attend, let us know. Probably notice it as a meeting. Nancy's.
Yes, and we'll need a few days' notice on that.
Yeah. Yeah. So just let us know. Also, heads up to the City Council. This is a somewhat urgent item for our water utility. The Davis Weaver Canal is going to be piping another stretch of the canal headed eastward toward Layton. And as they do so, there's a point where we have an 18-inch water line that currently goes underneath the canal, and we're replacing that stretch. We've already done a portion of it, but not where it goes under the canal. Since their contractor is soon to begin work, and we have an opportunity to put a casing underneath that canal for our future water line, our next project on that line, it's pretty urgent that we move forward with that. We've gotten bids to get that in front of the council for an official approval, but we do need to move forward quickly. So I wanted to give you a heads up. We'll provide the details in a memo to the staff, or sorry, to the council via email, but please let us know if you have any consternation whatsoever. We do need to move forward on that quickly. So anyway, look for that information via email. Also, I sent out the monthly report yesterday, and my last comment is Merry Christmas and have a very happy New Year. Our offices will be closed on the 24th, 25th, and the 1st.
Okay, Nancy?
Well, it's our last meeting of the year. We won't convene in a policy session again until Tuesday, January 8th. We won't have work session on the first. We plan on our retreat on the 17th of January, and then we'll have policy session, work session on the 22nd of January. Don't forget the holiday party on January 4th. That's up and coming, and I think that's it. I was trying to decide if there was something else.
I think that's it. Any other staff reports? I don't have a Trevor in here. There's really not. Nancy just kind of covered everything that we have PR-wise going on, so I would entertain a motion to adjourn as the City Council and reconvene as the CDRA.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay.
Welcome to CDRA meeting. Our first item is to consider approval of a couple of sets of minutes from October 9th and October 23rd. To read those.
Mr. Chairman, I move to approve those minutes as submitted.
Second.
Have a motion and a second to approve those minutes. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Second item is to consider approval of the addendum 1 to the memorandum of understanding with Lotus that we have previously discussed. Do we have any need to make any further discussion on that?
I would like to bring up that I don't disparage Lotus as a company and as a reputable entity. I've done independent research on them too. I don't necessarily take what somebody says about themselves as necessarily fully accurate, and so I look for other opportunities. There is certainly for 5, 10, 15, 20 years, maybe that would be a benefit, but part of the thing in long-term planning is none of us, including Lotus, knows where we're going to be 2 or 3 years from now. So we may not have Lotus with us 5 years from now. So we have to keep that in mind.
Thank you for that. If there's no other discussion, I'll take a motion on the item.
I'll move to approve the addendum 1 to the memorandum of understanding with Lotus Company for the redevelopment of Maybe Place and authorize your signature to any necessary documents.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed?
Nay.
Passed 4-1. The next item is to consider the approval of the purchase and sale agreement with Davis County for the properties located 562 South, 1000 East, and approximately 1 North Main Street for the library moving. Is you going to take that?
I'll take that. And also, before I forget, we do have with us tonight Mac McDonald from Davis County, Facilities Director. Okay. If there are any questions for Mac, I'm sure he'd be happy to speak. But as a brief introduction, we've discussed this many times with the City Council and with the CDRA Board, and we don't really have members of the public here. Everyone's staff except for Adam and Mac. Oh, and Mr. Bircher. Yes, good to see you. Failed to notice you.
He's all.
So what's before you tonight is a purchase and sale agreement wherein basically we purchase from the county the existing library property, and we sell to the county this corner just across the street over here. It's part of the Clearfield Junction subdivision, Lot 3. It's right on the corner. Sell that to the county for the construction of a new library. And then the next agenda item is actually a lease between the CDRA and the county where we lease back the existing library site to the county until the new library is constructed. They move in and they can demolish the existing library, and at that point we would take possession of those premises. That's it in a nutshell, but really this is awesome. And Vern, you mentioned how great it is to get to this point. What an accomplishment. And we've been working on this for more than a year, right, Mac? This is something that really is going to cement this intersection as our civic center. I can't tell you how excited I am that we're going to have a new library here right in downtown Clearfield. And the details are in the staff report, but if you have any questions, I can help answer, and so can Matt.
It just seems like a win-win for everyone. The The county gets a great library, we get it in a great location, we get some good land. So it's a governmental cooperation that's really a pleasing thing for taxpayers to see.
Absolutely, we're excited as well. The partnership, this North Library branch has been great with Clearfield City, and so we're appreciative of that and acknowledge that fact. You know, when we just about 3 years ago opened that Kaysville branch, which we used to be housed in a city building, and then built our own on city property, similar in nature. But we were surprised that the amount of patrons that came out, almost double the amount of what was in the original Kaysville Library. So we're excited to see that take place as well here as we build a new branch, to see that uptick in patronage, people coming out to visit the library. As we go through and program this library and begin to get on it, we're excited with the new concepts that we'll have for this branch. We're looking at kind of adjusting practices where typically a library is full of books, and that would like to have this more based on technology as well as the book portion of it. And so a little bit more advanced than what we've done in the past, but we feel that Clearfield is a great place to take on that endeavor and change up kind of our scheme and look and feel of library uses. And so we're excited for this partner. We're excited to be your tenant. We typically pride ourselves on not being shushing libraries, and so when people come, we don't shush them, but we're not too noisy, and so we don't anticipate to you for noisy tenants. Our parties typically consist of children's story time, and they can be a little bit noisy, but we don't anticipate any problem. But we're excited. We're excited to move forward. We're excited for the new location. For me, I'd love to capitalize on the name or the address itself in some form or fashion. But look forward to the designs. We'll be bringing those in partnership. We'd like to get some of the staff on board to help us in that design and selection of architects. So we're going arm in arm, hand in hand with this project, but a great location. We appreciate this opportunity.
Fantastic. Thank you. We appreciate it.
Thank you, Mayor.
I didn't see anything in the agreement about the demolition. Is it in there, or do we need to put that they will do the demolition?
Sale agreement.
Okay.
Yep.
We're just excited.
So the way it reads is, first of all, construction of the new library needs to begin by 2020, which, I mean, could potentially be 2 years from now, but hopefully it's not quite that long.
We're hoping, if you remember back, and I don't know how many of you, hopefully all of you took part in the Davis County tax increase that took place a couple years ago. In that increase, we promised that this would be one of those that we'd take care of, and so the funds are coming in. It's just a matter of actually implementation, and so now is the time. The stars are aligning. Kind of like I mentioned before, we are currently drafting the RFP to go out for architectural design. Originally, we kind of a cookie cutter from Kaysville and bring that here, but it just doesn't feel right. I'd rather have kind of its own Clearfield branch instead of a cookie cutter mimic to what you see now. Is our branch currently is a twin down to Bountiful, and we'd like to get out of that and kind of have its own unique. And so we're ready to go. As soon as we can get the transactions completed, we'll put that RFP out and get a contract or architect underway, and after that, part of the architectural services is construction management.
Something that complements what's going in would be great, you know.
Absolutely. So with that, part of our agreement with the CCNRs is we'll establish design guidelines with the current developer for Clearfield John to establish that and kind of help him pick some colors. I know that he was really interested in kind of a black and white, black and gray look and concept, and we're a little bit different than that. And so we'll like to help each other work through that.
He's excited to have you do that.
So yeah, he is. He is. And so we meet with him this week, and so things are moving along.
Great.
Ken, back to your question from a moment ago, the agreement also spells out that after the new library is occupied, then the county has 1 year to demolish the old library.
Okay, thank you.
I like the One North Main thing.
I do too. I absolutely love that one.
All right, is there any other discussion? Item 3.
Go ahead.
We're all excited.
It must be CDRA, not city council.
I think that means we are going to approve it. Mr. Chairman, I would move to approve the purchase and sale agreement with Davis County for the properties located at 562 South, 1000 East, and approximately 1 North Main Street, and would authorize your signature to any necessary documents.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Hell yeah. just to quote a good old friend of mine, yeah.
He turned his jacket on for it.
Yeah, that's right.
Any opposed? All right, item 4 is to approve the lease agreement, which we have already discussed.
Mr. Chairman, I move to approve the library lease agreement with Davis County South, 1000 East, and authorize your chair, or the chair's signature to any necessary documents.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed?
Thank you.
That's all the items we have on the CDRA.
Mr. Chairman, I move that we adjourn as the CDRA and reconvene as the city council in work session.
With an amendment, could we take a 5-minute recess as we transition?
Yeah.
Yeah, we can do that.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Well, hopefully.